Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.
Mr. Danielson?
Bruce Danielson, Sioux Falls. I just wanted to make a comment that we were promised to have the Sire update done today. And it doesn't work on Windows 10. The new Edge software doesn't work on Firefox. It's questionable what other platforms it works on. As of in a few months, we are no longer going to be having Internet Explorer 11 so that we can watch the council meetings in our homes or offices and do whatever else we want to do with them. And I got a phone call from one of the IT people, and I appreciated getting the phone call. But it sounds like we aren't going to be getting anything to do with iPads and droids, et cetera, for some time to come yet. And it's kind of disappointing because there was a lot of things we wanted to see on the budget but couldn't be here today. So now we have to figure out another way to see all the important things you guys did with the budget hearing today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Theresa Stehly, Sioux Falls. I'm here to talk to you about Drake Springs. And I know that we just had a beautiful prayer talking about our parks and our neighborhoods and our city being beautified and safe. And there's just a few things going on at Drake Springs I wanted to address to the council. And I thank you for listening to me, all of you. Go ahead, you could, okay, go ahead. About 6 years ago when we started building this pool, there was a master plan to do landscaping and have places for people to sit down south of where the new pool is being built. And I haven't heard anything recently about that master plan being implemented. If you go down to Drake Springs, you'll see that there are some things that are safety hazards. We've got if you look on the screen, there are covers to wells that go into the ground, and I've actually had the opportunity to look into those, that look like they need to be filled in. This is a structure there that was built in 1888, but if you notice that there is metal on the top, I've actually seen inside of there too. It goes down 15 feet, and at the time we looked in there several years ago, there was 15 feet of water underneath that. So if a kid would get up and jump on that, if several kids would be jumping on that, that thing could collapse and we'd have a huge calamity on our hands. We think that that should be filled in. I talked with the park guy today. He said that they wanted to preserve the outside of it, but the way it is right now, it needs to be addressed. And you have about a 2-foot fence that says keep off down there. And there you see the trap door that goes down into the well. And it looks like it's in need of some repair anyway. And there's also a structure that has stonework on it that looks like it's been patched. And I talked again with the employee today who said he's been patching it. You'll see it right here. And aesthetically, we think that that should be redone. We've got lots of resources to put landscaping throughout the city, and this should be retooled to make it look a little more attractive. Now, speaking of attractiveness, I had asked several years ago if we could put some park benches down there, and there were cement park benches in the old pool. I said, let's just use those in the area. I was down at Faywick Park today, and they have benches all over the place. This is a place where people are walking. It's in the center of our community. We'd like it to be a place where people can congregate and enjoy themselves. One person told me that if they do put benches in, they're going to have more people sleeping on them. And I said, well, that shouldn't be a hindrance to encouraging people to come down there during the day and enjoy it. So I guess what I'm asking for is that we could look at the safety issue of this and then maybe look at spending a little bit of revenue at making it look more beautiful. And just a side note, a group of us collected money a few years ago and did plant flower beds along Cliff Avenue to try to beautify it. But I think there's some work to be done. So that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time?
Robert Kolbe. Start my time. When sometimes you wonder why we come up here, those of us that speak at this point in the meeting. It's kind of like buying a shirt or a blouse. You don't expect it to be anything less than the best. And when you have a flaw that you see, then you take it back and you want to have some remediation on it. Now, how many times have any of you ever written the company that you bought the shirt or the blouse and said, damn, that was a fine piece of cloth? We expect the best when we go to the store. We expect the best here. So when you have people coming up to speak to you, it's because we, in our different sizes, see a flaw we see or think that needs remediation. Now, there was a story about the feeding of 5,000. And that happened a couple thousand years ago, and the guy didn't advertise, and he took a crowd out with him on a hillside and spoke to them, and someone recorded the message, and it was a message worth recording. And the crowd was made up of Judeans and Samaritans and Arabs, all Greeks. More recently, we fed 5,000 here in the city of Sioux Falls on a hillside. It was advertised, the other one wasn't, and we had 5,000 show up. Now, the question is, since it uses a politician's name as a celebration and the city supports it, does that particular political person pay 51% of the cost in order for that to happen? If they don't, then is this a political contribution to that particular individual? And how do they quantify the volunteers and all of the food that's served and all the things that, all the trappings that go with? Why is that not a political contribution? Now somebody can tell me, but why is that not a political contribution? I mean, it could be, let's just say, Councilman Anderson's 4th of July celebration. Now, in the old 5,000, they were fed loaves and fishes. And here it was pork sandwiches. Now, if it was Councilman Anderson's celebration, I know, because he likes and values the diversity we have here. But if you feed 5,000 people pork sandwiches, you're telling the Jews and the Muslims, we don't want you. We don't appreciate you. Now, that's not doing much for our diversity. And that's just one of the curious questions that I have. So, with that, I'll let the whatever stew in the pot, and we'll see if that bears, it would be a bad analogy to see if it bears fruit, but I'd like to have an answer or two. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak on a non-agenda item?
Sire Broussard, Sioux Falls. We have some issues in Sioux Falls as an activist, civil rights activist that I'm going to be putting here. I'm very disturbed at the public discrimination, employment discrimination. The police department and the mayor's office works for the community. The community does not work for the mayor or for the chief of police. We need to put politics aside and religion and do what's right for the community. At this point, I have about 7 lawsuits of public accommodation, discrimination due to gender, due to race. We don't need protest here. We don't need riots. Sioux Falls is not ready for it. Me as an African American coming from another state here, it's political. They use religion to discriminate and they downplay it by politics here. We need more active groups. Human trafficking is on the rise in Sioux Falls and prostitution. We don't need to house people in motels and hotels. We need more shelters here. Shelters not ran by religion. So all the vacancies that the city has, why don't y'all give up one of the buildings, get federal funding, get funding from the public, have volunteers run it, and have these homeless people that are sitting in alleyways getting picked up by the police because they passed out in a park and is bringing to detox in the jailhouse, which is bizarre because that happened 20 years ago. And let's make it right for the homeless people here. Putting people in motels and hotels to live in is not the place to be. It causes an unhealthy environment for the children. When you have drugs, you have prostitution, the police calls and the nuisance goes up when you have people living in hotels and motels. Hotels and motels is a commercial zoning, not residential. I think council members needs to put a city ordinance to bar that. When I worked with police departments around the state, we had issues on this. And I see it in motels and hotels. I see pimping and human trafficking and prostitution at city bus stops, at the city transportation. If the people were educated and know the red flags of human trafficking, prostitution, and pimping, you wouldn't see it on street corners where they're selling crack cocaine and food stamps $50 for $100 here. You wouldn't see it at the city where you catch the bus for public transportation here. I know that you're supposed to be getting a human director for the city of Sioux Falls here. I don't know when that's going to be. But let me tell you something. I'm all about action. I'm all about educating the court system. Because right now, these seven public accommodations, if there's a lawsuit, then the business closes down. The city don't get their money from the taxes, and it makes the city look ugly. Protesting and rioting, will it ever happen in Sioux Falls? I think so. There's so much prejudice here, it makes your head spin. 86% of the discrimination is employment discrimination here. I walk into a business because people's been discriminated against, and I walk into a business and they have on their policy that people cannot wear earrings, only females. What, did jury have a gender on it here? What's going on here? We have a meat packing plant that has pork in it. We have people from third world countries here that are Muslims. So what do? They put them in a meat packing plant that has pork because they can't provide for their people because $16 an hour, you can't get that nowhere else. So since Sioux Falls is so diverse and for people from other countries, and we have refugees here, why don't we get a place where we can put them getting $16 an hour and not having them deal with pork? It is a cultural and religious belief. There needs to be more community engagement in this city. Progressive policing needs to be enforced. People shouldn't be on street corners selling crack cocaine or at a gas station. If the police was more observant to it, they would get it off the streets. It's happening here. In 2012, the statistics of rape was 1 out of every 4 days. There was a rape occurring. 2015, probably more rapes occurring out here. We have the Multicultural Center, and we got all these organizations to outreach and to help and to educate these people. And we got this domestic shelter for people that's been in domestic abuse relationships. I don't know what's going on in the city. We have too much forward and nothing's happening. We have too many resources here. And we're still facing discrimination. We're still facing people getting picked up because they fell asleep in a park. So we're going to bring them to detox because they smell alcohol in your breath. Seriously? The chief of police, I had to call the mayor's office. The secretary told the chief of police to contact me. Chief of police hasn't contacted me, which is not unusual. I will pull up the dirt on the police department. If I find any dirt on the police department, they better get ready for it. We are a citizen here. Doesn't matter if you're a law-abiding citizen, if you have a criminal record or whatever not, you should be able to get a job here. When you go into a public housing, people should be able to get public housing. We're not going into a bank for a loan. I walked into housings where I said, okay, so what is the requirements to rent a house? You have to have 700 or 750 credit score. Really? Since when? Since when? Does these average people, middle-class people, and these poor people, and these people from third world countries really have that kind of credit score? So where do they put them at? You just walk on the street on the central side of town by the police station, and you see people homeless. And I go there and I say, why are you homeless? Because of my credit score, because of my criminal record. Nobody would take me in. We don't have shelters. We have shelters ran by religion, so religion could discriminate on who they can put in their shelter. We need a nonprofit shelter to where these homeless people can go to. We don't have it here in Sioux Falls. I'm going to end this because this can be hours and hours and hours. I plan on hitting the news media, and I plan on hitting the county with these lawsuits. So in about another 2 weeks, it's all going to come out. Whenever I do my lawsuits and do my sting operations, it's all on video camera and it's all recorded. And I want y'all to watch the news, and I want y'all to see what kind of public people that have businesses here do to individuals by color and by gender here. I don't know what else to say. Sioux Falls, if y'all don't come up and find solutions to resolve these problems, you're looking at some tough times with protesting and riots. I'm not saying I'm all about riots, but I'm saying there's people out here that would do it in a minute. I'm out on the streets every day,
Okay, ma'am.
every day on these
Excuse me.
issues.
I'm going to have you wind this up here. I've got you at 8 minutes now. And if I could have you give your information again, your name, please, so that we can have it for the records.
Sierra Broussard.
Thank you.
That's it. I don't have no other questions except for I hope that something changes within the last 2 or 3 months, and a human director with the city of Sioux Falls walks these streets and helps these people out, because we're going to be in the county courthouse with lawsuits, and we don't need that.
Thank you.
Greg Neitzer, Sioux Falls. First, I did notice that there's proposed amendments that were published for one of the agenda items tonight. That's wonderful. That needs to be done all the time, whenever there's going to be an amendment. Otherwise, if you bring up an amendment after the fact, we have no opportunity to comment on it. So this is, whoever came up with this, whoever did this, wonderful, it's great. I just wanted to say, as a father of a 6-year-old girl who's learning to swim, how much I want to thank the lifeguard who saved the life of another 6-year-old girl last week. And I want to thank all the other lifeguards for what they do. Hits home because of that, and if it's possible, I'd like to see her recognized publicly and honored, if it's okay with her and her parents. If they want their privacy, I totally respect that, but that would be a nice thing to do. Flood maps, we're almost there. It's a great thing. It was a big investment, and we're going to take out, 1,700, something like that, properties from the floodplain, and I don't think a lot of people realize how many people have been stuck for years waiting to develop their property, and they haven't been able to because they're under BFE. So indoor pools and the spray park, I'm hearing some good things. Sounds like the council is going to do probably something like what the citizens were promised, which was a season model maybe some reasonable rate increases. And so it sounds like it's moving in the right direction. So I'm encouraged by that, and I want to thank you for that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the proposal for the boulevard regulations being changed. I'm generally in big favor of increasing, I guess, liberty when it comes to the boulevard. I think it sends a terrible message when you have regulations that you don't enforce, because you end up with a selective enforcement issue, and it puts your city employees in a terrible position when they're enforcing some but not others. So if you're not going to enforce it, you need to take it off the books, or you need to change it. I lived on an emergency snow route for several years, and I can speak to the frustration of every year planting grass, taking all of that time, and grass is so expensive, and taking pride in your property and your boulevard in front of you, and getting it looking wonderful by the time, September, October rolls around, and then they would just burn it all winter long. And I'm not blaming the, snow, I'm not blaming the city, but that's just what happens. And then you would plant it again, and I did that year after year after year. And if there was some other option, it would be a nice thing to have. And there's a lot of people that I see with double frontage lots where they're, one of their frontages, like their backyard, is on an arterial, and it's just burned. It's just dead. And I suspect that a lot of them just probably thrown up their hands, where it just gets to be too much. I mean, you can't get grass to stay. So I think within reason, we need to talk about things like living ground cover, particularly perennials and some of those other things. So the only thing I would throw out is there's two things I would think about, I guess. The first is the function of the boulevard, which is to carry utilities. So I would want to ask the players, particularly the public works and private utilities, what works and what doesn't work. What is going to cause you a lot of problems? For example, if somebody paves their entire boulevard, is that going to be a problem? I'm pretty sure it probably is. What's going to be a big impediment? River rock. If it's completely full of river rock, is that going to be a problem? And then the other thing when it comes to the utility companies and public works is, I think there needs to be discussion about where does liability and reimbursement fall. For example, if somebody spends $1,000, for example, making their boulevard beautiful with perennials, and they come in and they need to tear it up to put a new cable line in, how much are they expected to do? Do they have to replace everything? Do they have to, right now they just throw some grass down, and I know that from personal experience, and they're on their way. So what are they going to be required to do? It should probably be something like an at your own risk sort of a deal, where if you put in lots of perennials and they have to tear it up, well, that's just the way it is. But that probably has to be addressed, because I can say from personal experience, when I had my road reconstructed, there were a few neighbors that were hopping mad when the cable company came through, or whoever came through, and they tore up the boulevard and they didn't put the grass down exactly the way they wanted it. Now imagine if you have hundreds of dollars of perennials, you're probably not going to be happy if they tear it up and they're on their way. So I think that needs to be clarified. And then the other is public safety, obviously. The zoning regulations, which ends at the property line, has concepts of driveway safety zones and intersection safety zones. And that prevents certain things like solid fences and monument-style signs in certain areas that are going to be critically, that's going to cause problems, safety issues. Like you can't put up a 6-foot fence at the corner of a corner lot where there's an intersection, because people won't be able to see. So there has to be something in place. Now, within reason, so there's probably going to have to be some sort of height regulation, or maybe, as of right now, you can't do, I believe, a tree within 30 feet of an intersection, and I think 20 feet of a stop sign or a yield sign. So maybe something like that has to be thought about. So public safety, and how do the utility companies deal with it? Otherwise, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time?
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on.